It was my son Ethan's wedding day, a perfect June afternoon at the Edgewater Hotel in Seattle, with Puget Sound sparkling under the sun. The banquet hall buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of a string quartet. I stood near the bar, adjusting my tie, watching my son and his new bride Sophia Larson glide through the crowd. She was radiant, no question, but there was a sharpness in her smile that I'd come to know too well. Then it happened. Sophia, her arm looped through Ethan's, spotted her boss, Margaret Hensley, across the room. With a confident toss of her hair, she led Ethan over, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "Margaret," she said, her tone dripping with self-assurance, "I'd like you to meet my husband, Ethan, and his father, Arthur Bennett." She paused, her eyes flicking to me with a hint of pity. "He's, well, a retired drifter, I suppose. Lives a simple life out in the suburbs." The words landed like a slap, sharp and deliberate. A few of Sophia's colleagues from Biogenics, her biotech company, turned their heads, smirking. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my smile in place. Then Margaret, elegant in her navy dress, tilted her head, her eyes locking onto mine. A slow, warm smile spread across her face. "Arthur," she said, her voice rich with recognition. "My old friend. It's been too long." She stepped forward, clasping my hand. Then she turned to Sophia, her smile vanishing. "You're done at Biogenics, Sophia. Fired." Sophia's face froze, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Let me take you back a few months, to a chilly March evening at the Pink Door, a cozy restaurant tucked along Seattle's waterfront. The place was alive with the clink of wine glasses and the soft glow of candlelight reflecting off Puget Sound. I sat across from my son, Ethan, and his fiancée, Sophia Larson, watching her adjust the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Ethan, my boy, was all smiles, his eyes bright with love for this woman who seemed to command every room she entered. Me? I was just trying to enjoy my clam chowder and keep the conversation light. But Sophia had other plans. She leaned forward, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as a tack. "So, Arthur," she said, not even waiting for our drinks to arrive, "Ethan tells me you're, well, between things right now. Between things." The phrase hung in the air like a fog rolling off the sound, heavy and unwelcome. I unfolded my napkin, keeping my eyes on her. "Retired, actually," I said, my voice calm. "Just enjoying the quieter side of life." Sophia's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, of course, retirement." She said it like it was a condition, not a choice. "Must be nice to have all that free time. Hobbies, right? That's what keeps you busy at your age? At my age. I'm 62, not exactly ancient, but her words carried that polite condescension young folks sometimes use when they think they've got the world figured out. Ethan shifted in his seat, his smile faltering. "Dad's always been modest," he said, trying to steer things back. "He's got a knack for gardening." "Gardening," Sophia repeated, her tone suggesting it was a quaint little pastime for someone with nothing better to do. "That's sweet." She sipped her wine, then leaned back, her bracelet catching the candlelight. "I'm in project management at Biogenics, you know. Leading a team on a multi-million-dollar gene therapy project. Increased our division's revenue by 35% last year." She paused, clearly expecting applause. I nodded politely. "Sounds like you're doing well, Sophia." "Well?" She laughed a little too loudly. "I'm on track to be director by next year. It's all about staying ahead, you know? Adapting. The biotech world moves fast. You've got to be sharp, driven. My generation gets that. The jab wasn't subtle. My generation apparently didn't get much of anything." I took a sip of my water, my fingers tightening slightly on the glass. Ethan jumped in. Bless him. "Sophia, Dad's always been into business himself. He's just low-key about it. Business?" Sophia raised an eyebrow, her smile turning patronizing. "What kind, Arthur? Small retail, maybe? Or consulting?" I could have told her right then. Could have mentioned Biogenics, the company I co-founded nearly 30 years ago in a cramped office with my partner, Margaret Hensley. Could have mentioned the patents, the late nights, the breakthroughs that turned a dream into a biotech giant pulling in $200 million a year. But I didn't. I wanted to see how far she'd go. Nothing too fancy, I said, spooning my chowder. Just enough to keep me grounded. Sophia waved a hand, dismissing my entire life with a flick of her wrist. Well, the important thing is staying active, right? Maybe you could try something new. I could connect you with some folks at Biogenics. Entry-level stuff, nothing too taxing. We're always looking for dependable people, dependable. Like I was some retiree desperate for a paycheck to cover my grocery bill. Ethan's face flushed and he opened his mouth to protest, but I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. Let her talk, I thought. Every word was another piece of kindling for the fire I was starting to build. Tell me about Biogenics, I said, steering the conversation away from my supposed failures. What kind of projects? Sophia's eyes lit up, and she launched into a lecture about gene-editing algorithms and corporate efficiency, her voice brimming with self-importance. We're revolutionizing healthcare, she said, cutting into her grilled halibut with precision. The company's been around forever, but let's be honest, it was just a lucky startup back then. Now, people like me are pushing it to the next level. Lucky. 30 years of 18-hour days, missed family dinners, and scraped-together loans reduced to luck. I stirred my chowder, letting her words settle. Lucky, huh? I said, my voice neutral. Oh, absolutely, she said, missing the edge in my tone. The founders probably just stumbled into it. No offense, but back then biotech was barely a thing. Now it's about vision, innovation. You've got to disrupt the old ways of thinking. Disrupt. The word landed like a stone in my chest. I glanced at Ethan, who was staring at his plate, clearly torn between defending me and keeping the peace with his fiancée. Sophia didn't notice. She was too busy savoring her victory over the old man who, in her mind, was just a drifter with a garden and no ambition. As we left the restaurant, the cool Seattle breeze hit my face and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, sharper, purpose. Sophia thought she had me figured out. Fine. I'd let her keep thinking that. For now. The weeks after that dinner at the Pink Door felt like a slow chess game, and I was playing the long strategy. I'd always been good at keeping my cards close, letting people reveal themselves while I watched. Sophia, bless her heart, was making that part easy. Every time she came by my little house in Redmond, just outside Seattle, she'd drop another comment, another little jab, like she was trying to win some unspoken contest. And me? I just smiled, tended my tomato plants, and let her think she had me all figured out. My house isn't much to look at. A modest bungalow with a tidy garden and a porch where I read the morning paper. It's comfortable, sure, but nothing like the sleek condo Sophia and Ethan shared downtown. She'd walk in, her heels clicking on my hardwood floors, and her eyes would sweep the place with that polite disappointment young folks sometimes use when they think they've outgrown simplicity. It's cozy, she'd say, like cozy was a disease. Must be nice to live so. Unburdened. That was her favorite word for me. Code for aimless old man with no drive. I'd nod, offer her a glass of lemonade, and change the subject. But every word went into a mental ledger, each one a brick in the lesson I was building for her. One sunny afternoon in April, Ethan stopped by alone. He found me in the backyard, pruning my roses, the air thick with the smell of fresh earth. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking like the boy who used to ask me for help with his math homework. Dad, he said, his voice tight, why don't you just tell her? About biogenics, about who you really are. I set down my shears and wiped my hands on my old flannel shirt. Ethan, I said, gesturing to the bench I'd built last summer, sit with me a minute. He did, though he looked restless, like he was carrying the weight of Sophia's words on his shoulders. "She doesn't mean to be harsh," he said, almost pleading. "She's just driven. She thinks she's helping, offering you advice." "Advice," I repeated, letting the word hang between us like a question. Sophia's advice had included suggesting I look into gig work, or maybe a part-time security job at Biogenics. As if Arthur Bennett, who'd spent 30 years turning a biotech dream into a company with 800 employees, needed to stand at a gate checking IDs. "Son," I said, keeping my voice soft, "I'm not mad at Sophia, not yet. But people show you who they are when they think they're in control. I want to see what kind of person she is when she thinks I'm just a drifter." Ethan's eyes searched mine, and I saw the conflict there. He loved Sophia, no question. I could see it in the way his face lit up when she walked into a room. But he also knew me, knew the man who'd built Biogenics from a tiny lab with nothing but grit, coffee, and a handshake with my partner, Margaret Hensley. "You're planning something," he said, half accusing, half curious. "I know you, Dad. You've got that look." I chuckled, picking up a rose clipping and twirling it between my fingers. "All I'm doing is giving Sophia time to show her true colors. If she's the woman you want to marry, she'll figure out that respect isn't tied to a job title or a bank account." He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "She's not always like this. When it's just us, she's kind, funny. She cares about people. I believe you," I said, and I meant it. "But character isn't what you show when it's easy, Ethan. It's what comes out when you think no one important is watching." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You want me to keep quiet about Biogenics, don't you?" "Just for a little longer," I said. "Let her think what she wants. The wedding's in June. Plenty of time for her to decide who she wants to be." Ethan sighed, but I could tell he trusted me. "Okay, Dad, but don't break her, all right? I love her." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "I'm not trying to break anyone, son. I'm trying to protect you. Better to know now than 5 years down the road." He didn't say much after that, just helped me water the garden before heading back to the city. But as I watched his car disappear down the street, I felt that familiar spark of purpose settle in my chest. Sophia wanted to judge me by my old flannel shirts and my modest house. Fine, I'd let her. But I was already laying the groundwork for a lesson she'd never forget. That evening, I poured myself a cup of coffee and dialed Margaret Hensley's number. She picked up on the first ring, her voice as warm and sharp as ever. "Arthur Bennett," she said. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Tired of playing retired gardener yet?" I laughed, settling into my study. A small room lined with books, a few framed awards, and a photo of Margaret and me from 1995, standing outside our first lab, looking young and invincible. "Not quite," I said. "Just checking in. How's Biogenics holding up without me?" "Chaos as usual," she teased. "But the quarterly numbers are solid. Your absence hasn't sunk us yet." She paused, then her tone shifted. "How's that future daughter-in-law of yours?" "Ethan's fiancée. Sophia, right?" "Ambitious," I said carefully. "Very ambitious." Margaret caught the edge in my voice. "Uh-oh, I know that tone." "What's she done?" "Let's just say she's got some strong opinions about success," I said, sipping my coffee. "Thinks the company's early days were just luck. Says people like her are the ones driving real innovation now." Margaret let out a low whistle. "Luck, huh? 30 years of 16-hour days and she calls it luck. Sounds like she's got a lot to learn about biogenics." "She will," I said, my voice steady. "At the wedding." "You're coming, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," she said. "What are you cooking up, Arthur?" "Just a little clarity," I replied. "Bring your sharpest suit. It's going to be educational." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and pulled up Biogenics' latest financials. 200 million in annual revenue, a team of researchers pushing boundaries in gene therapy, and a legacy Margaret and I had built from nothing. Sophia thought it was luck. She thought I was a drifter. Perfect. I'd let her keep believing that for a few more months. I started a list on a legal pad, jotting down every condescending comment Sophia had made. The gig work suggestion, the way she'd called my house cozy like it was a charity case. Her lecture about how my generation didn't understand ambition. Each one was a piece of the puzzle. A reason to make sure the wedding on June 15th would be a day she'd never forget. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that old photo of Margaret and me. We'd been younger than Sophia back then, full of fire and no idea if we'd make it. We'd built something real, something lasting. And Sophia, she was about to learn what 30 years of experience looked like when it decided to teach a lesson. The days slipped by like waves on Puget Sound, steady and relentless, carrying us closer to Ethan's wedding on June 15th. I played my part perfectly. The unassuming retiree, pottering around my garden, reading on my porch, letting Sophia build her little kingdom of assumptions. But beneath the surface, I was putting the final pieces in place for a lesson she'd carry for years. The rehearsal dinner was set for the evening before the wedding. At the Edgewater Hotel's private dining room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the dark, shimmering water outside. I arrived early, dressed in a simple cardigan and slacks, my gray hair a little tousled from the Seattle breeze. Ethan and Sophia were already there, directing caterers and fussing over table settings. Ethan caught my eye and gave me a nervous smile, like he knew something was brewing but wasn't sure what. Sophia, in a sleek emerald dress, barely glanced my way. As guests trickled in, mostly Sophia's biogenics colleagues and a few family friends, she took center stage, her voice carrying that polished confidence I'd come to expect. Everything has to be perfect, she told a waiter, adjusting a centerpiece with a flick of her wrist. Margaret Hensley's coming tomorrow. My boss, she's a legend in biotech. First impressions matter, you know. I sipped my water, standing off to the side, watching her work the room. Then she spotted me and her smile tightened just a fraction. "Arthur," she called, loud enough for her colleagues to hear. "Glad you made it. I hope we're not interrupting your evening routine. As if I spent my nights dozing in front of the TV with a cup of decaf. I smiled back, keeping it light. "Wouldn't miss it, Sophia." "Big day tomorrow," she nodded, then turned to a cluster of her biogenics team, her voice carrying deliberately. "This is Ethan's dad, Arthur," she said, gesturing toward me like I was a museum exhibit. "He's retired, lives out in Redmond, keeps things simple." The word simple landed like a pebble in a pond, rippling through the group. A few of her colleagues nodded politely, their eyes already drifting elsewhere. In their world, retirees were background noise, pleasant but irrelevant. One woman in a sharp blazer offered a sympathetic smile. "Retirement must be relaxing," she said. "What do you do with all that time?" "Oh, a little gardening, a little reading," I said, my voice mild. "Keeps me grounded," Sophia jumped in, her tone dripping with that familiar condescension. "Arthur's got a charming little place. Very modest. It's inspiring, really, how some people embrace a quieter life. Inspiring." The word was a knife wrapped in velvet, and I felt Ethan tense beside me. He opened his mouth, but I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. "Not yet, son. Let her dig a little deeper." "Sophia," I said, keeping my tone even, "you're putting a lot of thought into this wedding. Margaret must be someone special to impress." Her eyes lit up, sensing an opportunity to shine. "Oh, Margaret Hensley. She's a titan. Built biogenics from nothing into a biotech powerhouse. She values excellence, ambition. People who show up and deliver." She paused, her gaze flicking to my cardigan. "You'll want to dress up a bit tomorrow, Arthur. Margaret notices everything. How you present yourself, how you carry yourself. It's about projecting dignity. As if my 30 years building biogenics with Margaret, surviving on instant noodles and sheer stubbornness, Didn't count because I wasn't wearing a tailored suit. I nodded slowly. I'll keep that in mind, Sophia. Don't want to embarrass anyone. She beamed, mistaking my calm for surrender. Exactly. It's Ethan's big day, too. We need to make the right impression for Margaret. She's not just my boss. She's the kind of person who can make or break a career. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his hand brushing Sophia's arm. Soph, maybe we should focus on the rehearsal, but Sophia was on a roll. No, Ethan, it's important. Arthur, I could help you pick out a tie or something. Nothing too flashy, just appropriate. You know, for a setting like this, appropriate. I almost laughed. Margaret and I had spent our early days at Biogenics wearing mismatched socks and living off vending machine snacks. If anyone knew about substance over style, it was her, but I just nodded. Appreciate the thought, Sophia. I'll manage. Her smile said she didn't believe me, but she moved on, turning to charm her colleagues with stories of her latest project. Ethan leaned close, his voice low. Dad, you're killing me with this act. Just tell her. I patted his shoulder. Patience, son. Some lessons need the right stage. That stage was coming together faster than Sophia could imagine. Earlier that week, I'd visited a tailor in downtown Seattle, a small shop on Pike Street where the owner, Elena, knew my taste for understated elegance. This suit, she'd said, holding up a charcoal gray jacket, says confidence without shouting. Perfect for a man like you. I'd smiled, running my fingers over the subtle pinstripes. That's the idea, Elena. Quiet strength. Then there were the cufflinks. I'd stopped by a jeweler in Belltown, picking out a pair engraved with Biogenics' logo, a delicate helix design with a single sapphire chip. Custom order? The jeweler asked, raising an eyebrow. Something like that, I said, fastening them to my shirt. They caught the light just right, subtle but unmistakable. Margaret would spot them in a heartbeat. And the final touch, a certified document from my banker, authorizing a $75,000 grant for a gene therapy research project in Ethan and Sophia's name. Not a check, but a legacy, something that would hit Sophia harder than any dollar amount. I wanted her to see what real impact looked like. Not just the kind you flaunt at a cocktail party, as the rehearsal dinner wound down. Sophia's voice carried across the room, lecturing her colleagues about disrupting outdated systems at Biogenics. I caught Ethan's eye, and he gave me a look that said he was torn between love and dread. You sure about this, Dad? He whispered as we stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against us. Trust me, Ethan, I said, my voice steady. Tomorrow's going to be a day nobody forgets. I walked to my car, the Seattle skyline glittering across the water. Sophia thought she had the world figured out. Thought she could size me up with one glance at my old cardigan and modest house. Tomorrow she'd learn how expensive assumptions can be. June 15th dawned bright and clear, the kind of Seattle day that makes you forget the rain ever existed. The Edgewater Hotel was a hive of activity, florists arranging roses, caterers bustling, and the soft sparkle of Puget Sound framing it all through the banquet hall's windows. I dressed that morning with the care of a man stepping onto a stage he'd been preparing for months. The charcoal gray suit fit like a second skin, its subtle pinstripes catching the light just so. I fastened the Biogenics cufflinks, their sapphire helix glinting with quiet promise. Today those little pieces of platinum would speak louder than any words. I arrived at the hotel's chapel just before noon, the air thick with the scent of lilies and anticipation. Ethan was upstairs with Sophia, probably calming her pre-wedding jitters. I found a spot near the chapel entrance, watching guests file in, family, friends, and a cluster of Sophia's Biogenics colleagues, their tailored suits and polished smiles marking them as corporate climbers. Margaret Hensley stood near the front, elegant in a navy dress, her sharp eyes scanning the room with the curiosity of someone meeting her employee's new family. She hadn't spotted me yet, but I knew that moment was coming. Sophia emerged from a side room, radiant in her white gown, her confidence practically shimmering like the chandelier overhead. Ethan trailed behind, looking handsome but nervous, his eyes flicking to me as if searching for reassurance. Sophia, though, was in her element, greeting guests with a smile that said she owned this day. Then she saw me, and her expression faltered, just for a second. Maybe last night's rehearsal had left a mark, my quiet warning about expensive assumptions still echoing. "Arthur," she said, approaching with forced warmth, "you clean up nicely." "I'm glad you took my advice about the suit," I smiled, adjusting my cufflinks. "Didn't want to disappoint, Sophia. Big day for you and Ethan." She nodded, already turning to a group of her colleagues. "Everyone," she called, her voice carrying across the chapel. "This is Ethan's father, Arthur Bennett. He's retired, lives out in Redmond, keeps things simple." That word again, simple. It landed like a spark in dry grass, and her colleagues nodded politely, their interest already fading. To them, I was just another gray-haired retiree, irrelevant to their world of biotech deals and corner offices. Sophia leaned in, her voice lower but still loud enough for nearby ears. "Don't worry, Arthur. Margaret's here today, so just be yourself. She appreciates authenticity, even in modest circumstances. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my smile steady. "Looking forward to meeting her," I said, my tone as calm as the sound outside. The ceremony began, and I took my place to walk Sophia down the aisle. Ethan had insisted, a nod to tradition despite Sophia's raised eyebrow. She tucked her arm through mine, her gown rustling, and for a moment I saw the woman my son loved, radiant, nervous, human. "You're doing great, Sophia," I whispered as we moved forward. She glanced at me, surprised by the kindness. "Thanks, Arthur," she murmured, her voice softening. But I knew what was coming. The officiant, a warm older man in a black robe, asked, "Who gives this woman in marriage?" "I do," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the chapel. "Her father-in-law with love and hope for her happiness." I placed her hand in Ethan's, catching his eye. He gave me a small nod, like he knew the storm was about to break. The vows were beautiful, heartfelt. Sophia and Ethan spoke with sincerity, and for a moment I let myself feel the joy of my son's new chapter. But as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and the chapel erupted in applause, I saw Sophia scan the crowd, her eyes locking onto Margaret with a triumphant smile. She thought she'd pulled it off, married her dream man, impressed her boss, and kept her drifter father-in-law from embarrassing her. The receiving line formed in the vestibule, guests offering hugs and congratulations. I stood as father of the groom, shaking hands, accepting compliments about the ceremony. Sophia was glowing, introducing Ethan as my husband with a pride that was almost contagious. Almost. Then Margaret approached, her presence commanding without trying. Sophia straightened, her smile turning professional. "Margaret," she said, her voice smooth as glass, "I'm so glad you could make it. This is my husband Ethan and his father." She gestured toward me, her tone shifting to that familiar condescension. "Arthur Bennett. He's a retired drifter, lives simply out in Redmond." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate, like a toast gone wrong. Her biogenics colleagues nearby exchanged glances, some smirking, others uncomfortable. I stepped forward, extending my hand to Margaret, my cufflinks catching the chandelier light. Margaret's eyes met mine, then dropped to the cufflinks, the biogenics helix, unmistakable after 30 years. Her face changed, surprise flickering into recognition, then warmth. "Arthur," she said, her voice carrying a mix of shock and delight. "Arthur Bennett. What in the world are you doing here?" Sophia blinked, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. "You know him?" "Know him?" Margaret's laugh was sharp, drawing every eye in the room. "Sophia, this is Arthur Bennett, my partner, the co-founder of Biogenics. The man who built half our gene therapy patents from scratch. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Sophia's face went pale, her perfect wedding day composure crumbling like sand. Her colleagues froze, their murmurs dying as they realized something monumental was unfolding. Ethan stepped closer to Sophia, his expression torn between sympathy and dread. Co-founder? Sophia's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. That's impossible. He's just what? Margaret's tone turned cold, her eyes narrowing. Just the man you called a drifter? The man whose work you've been profiting from for 3 years? Sophia's mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting between me and Margaret. I didn't know, she stammered. He never said? Margaret cut her off, her voice like steel. Respect doesn't require a resume, Sophia. You judged him by his clothes, his house, his age. And you judged wrong. The banquet hall was silent now, guests forming a loose circle around us, their champagne forgotten. Sophia's hands trembled, her wedding glow replaced by raw panic. Margaret, please, she said, her voice breaking. This is my wedding day. I made a mistake. I can explain. Margaret's expression didn't soften. You can explain to HR on Monday. Your time at Biogenics is over. Sophia swayed, and Ethan caught her arm, his face a mask of worry. The weight of her words, her assumptions, her arrogance, it all crashed down in front of everyone who mattered. And I stood there, calm as ever, watching the lesson I'd planned for months unfold in perfect, devastating clarity. The banquet hall at the Edgewater Hotel felt like it had frozen in time. The string quartet's notes hung in the air. Champagne glasses sat untouched, and every eye was on Sophia, her face pale as her wedding gown. Margaret Hensley's words, "Your time at Biogenics is over," echoed like a gavel striking. Sophia's hand clutched Ethan's arm, her eyes wide with a mix of panic and shame. Her colleagues, who'd been so quick to smirk at me earlier, now stood silent, witnesses to a fall they'd never expected. I could have let it end there. Could have let Sophia walk away with the weight of her mistake, her career in tatters on her wedding day. After months of her condescension, calling me a drifter, suggesting I take a security job, dismissing my life as simple, it would have been easy to watch her crumble. But as I looked at her, trembling in her white dress, I saw something else. Not just the arrogant young woman who judged me by my old flannel shirts. I saw the woman my son loved, the one he'd chosen to build a life with. And I saw Ethan standing beside her, his face torn between loyalty to her and trust in me. "Margaret," I said, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through the heavy silence. "Hold on a moment." Margaret turned to me, her eyebrows rising slightly. She'd known me for 30 years, through every high and low of building Biogenics. She trusted my judgment, even when it surprised her. The room waited, every guest leaning in, sensing the drama wasn't over. I stepped closer to Sophia, who looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears that threatened to ruin her carefully applied makeup. "Sophia," I said, keeping my tone gentle but steady, "look at me." She did, her gaze flickering with fear and something new, genuine remorse. Not just for the job she was losing, but for the way she'd treated me. I could see it in her eyes, raw and real. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know, Arthur. I was wrong." "So wrong," I nodded, letting her words settle. "I accept your apology," I said, watching relief flicker across her face, fragile as a candle in the wind. "But there's one condition." "Anything," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please." "I'll do anything." "Never again judge someone's worth by their job, their house, or the car they drive," I said, my words slow and deliberate. "Respect isn't about titles or bank accounts. It's about how you treat people, especially when you think they're beneath you." She nodded, tears spilling now, her hands twisting the edge of her gown. "I understand. I promise. I've learned my lesson. I turned to Margaret, who was watching with the sharp focus of someone weighing a critical decision. "Margaret," I said, "Sophia made a mistake. A big one, but we've all misjudged someone at some point. You and I did, back in the early days when we thought we knew everything." Margaret's lips twitched, a hint of a smile breaking through her stern facade. "You're too soft, Arthur," she said, but there was warmth in her voice. "I'm asking you to give her a chance," I continued, placing a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "She's got a good track record at biogenics. 35% growth doesn't happen by accident. Maybe this lesson will make her a better leader, not just a more careful one." Sophia looked between us, her breath shallow, like someone waiting for a verdict that would change her life. Ethan stepped closer, his hand finding hers, his eyes pleading silently with Margaret. Margaret studied Sophia for a long moment, her gaze unflinching. Then she sighed, her shoulders relaxing. "All right, Arthur," she said. "For you, I'll bend. Sophia, you're on probation. 6 months. One hint of the attitude you showed Arthur and you're out." "Understood?" "Completely," Sophia managed, her voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you, Margaret." "Thank you, Arthur." I extended my hand to her, and she shook it, her grip trembling but firm, like she was sealing a promise. "Welcome to the family, Sophia," I said softly. "Just remember, everyone deserves respect until they prove otherwise." She nodded, tears streaming now, and Ethan pulled her into a hug, whispering something that made her smile through the mess of her mascara. Margaret clapped me on the shoulder, her old grin returning. 30 years, Arthur, and you still surprise me." "Keeps life interesting," I replied, feeling the weight of the moment lift. As the quartet struck up again, the guests relaxed, conversations bubbling back to life. I stepped to the side, pulling an envelope from my jacket. The $75,000 research grant for a gene therapy project in Ethan and Sophia's name. I handed it to Ethan, who opened it, his eyes widening. "Dad," he said, his voice thick, "this is incredible." "It's for both of you," I said. "A reminder that real success isn't about what you show off. It's about what you build for others." Sophia looked at the grant, then at me, her expression softer than I'd ever seen. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." As the reception swirled around us, I watched Sophia move through the crowd. The sharp edge of her confidence was gone, replaced by something humbler, more human. Sometimes the best lessons don't come from punishment. They come from mercy, from giving someone a chance to be better. And here's the truth I've learned in 62 years. Respect isn't earned by titles or wealth. It's given freely because every person carries a story you might not see at first glance. Judge too quickly and you risk missing the heart of who they are.